Alistair Bunkle there. Well, let's get the rest of the day's news. Charlotte's here with us.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Good morning. BP says it successfully placed a new cap on the well leaking oil into the Gulf of Mexico. It's hoped the device will treble the amount of oil that can be captured and could seal it for good. Tests will now be done to see if the cap works, as our US correspondent Robert Nisbet explained.
Gently, they lower the...
And Paul, the psychic octopus, has made such a name for himself predicting World Cup winners that he's left bookmakers in a bit of a flutter. William Hill is so fearful of his powers that they've approached his owners at the Sea Life Aquarium in Oberhausen to see if they can buy him. But after correctly predicting the outcome of all 7 of Germany's games, plus the Spain-Holland final, they've confirmed that Paul is sadly going to retire from football predictions. I guess maybe he felt he couldn't maintain that winning streak. Do you think it was the pressure that got to him?
I don't know. It's difficult to know when octopuses retire, really, isn't it? When they get past their best. Perhaps he's felt he's delivered the most he can to the public and are now just quietly going, I don't know, eat mollusks
back
somewhere.
From the limelight.
Exactly. Good stuff, Charlotte. Thanks very much indeed. Let's take a look at what's on the front. Very good morning to you. You're watching Sunrise. Andrew Wilson here with you live through until 9. Still to come, a review of this morning's newspapers with podcaster Ollie Mann. But first, our top story this morning, calling for calm in Northern Ireland. Ollie Mann's still standing by, but first, Charlotte's here with the rest of the day's news. Charlotte, tell us all about it.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning. BP says it successfully placed a new cap on the well leaking oil into the Gulf of Mexico. It's hoped the device will treble the amount of oil that can be captured and
Charlotte, good stuff. Thanks very much indeed. Well, it's time for a look at the papers now. Ollie Mann is here. I think the French paper reviewers this morning probably having more of a laugh than we can.
I think
There's
so.
all sorts of things.
Although it was interesting looking at that footage just now. You saw a bit of Sarkozy in France and then a bit of Castro in Cuba. The difference of TV production values was very obvious, I think, between the two countries.
They're probably both standing on a box.
That's probably true.
What do you got for us, Ollie?
What is this now? Day 9 or 10 of Raoul Moat being on the front of the tabloids. I mean, of course, people are still interested in this story, but the Sun story, at first glance, is quite disturbing. Twisted is the headline. 18,000 people in Moat Facebook tribute. So this is people joining groups on Facebook called things like Good on you, Raoul Moat, I heart Raoul Moat, R.I.P. Raoul Moat. The Sun's knee-jerk but obvious kind of editorial line is, this is disgusting, they're memorialising a killer, and so on. But it leaves a slightly unsavoury taste in my mouth, not because it isn't disgusting to write, flagrantly supportive messages for someone you've never met who is a lone gunman, but because I remember this story coming out at the weekend, and I remember the tribute sites being reported as 2,000 or 3,000 strong. They're now 18,000 strong, which seems to me to indicate that really the people that are doing this are doing it as a kind of countercultural, ironic joke. And it's a very bad taste joke. But I think anyone who knows anything about the internet knows that if something's being this hyped by the media, there's a lot of people who are going to go, to you then, and join this group. It's thoughtless and it is rather unpleasant. But I'm afraid the Sun's stoking the fire here.
Of course. It's like a mixture with those sick jokes that always follow disasters that people pass around at the water cooler, isn't it?
Exactly.
And also this reaction to the fact that Raoul Moat himself complained on his dictaphone message
about the media.
Campsite, about everyone, writing his story without him getting a say.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And everyone's had that experience of getting a bad taste joke by text message. And since time immemorial, people have always had a diversity of opinion about people who are in the public eye in this way. And I think it's inevitable that this kind of thing happens. It's just now it happens on Facebook. And in defence of Facebook, last week, I mean, again, the Sun having its cake and eating it, they were printing pictures off Facebook of Raoul Moat, happy to plunder it as a resource. And of course, people were posting on their cons in prison, saying, give yourself up, mate, hand yourself in. And obviously that didn't work, but it might have. It was actually a way of communicating with him from the outside, which was quite valuable.
It's all new, isn't it?
It is. But yes, a real story about Raoul Moat now, and the kind of incredible humanity being shown by David Rathband, who's the PC that he shot through the car window, who may be blinded now for life, we don't know. But he said, I bear no malice to Moat. So I kind of think, whilst the media is talking about all this other sort of peripheral stuff with reaction, here's someone whose life really has been changed forever by Raoul Moat, who's showing incredible courage. And also, whilst the media is talking about tasers and police complaints commissions, it's a reminder of what they were facing for those 6 or 7 hours or whatever it was outside. This is someone with a gun who could point it at them. And it's just, it's a real wake-up call reading it and thinking what he's been through and also how well he's dealt with it.
Facts of life, isn't it? With all this non-stop coverage on Facebook and in the media, people start putting words into other people's mouths, don't they? And so there's all this talk about 60 policemen hell-bent on revenge and,
yes,
so on and so forth. So you're right, it evens it out a bit, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Something now in a similar vein about what you might do if you're faced with a difficult situation. There's a report by the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, which I have to say is not an organisation I usually read publications from.
But it must be a marvellous one,
I'm sure it is. This was very interesting. 62% of Britons surveyed said they would not intervene to stop a group of teenagers bashing up a bus stop, compared with 48% in the rest of Europe. Apparently, across the whole of Europe, we have the worst rates for people saying that they wouldn't get involved in antisocial behaviour to try and break it up and stop it. And having just talked about that policeman and the bravery that he's showing, I can completely understand these statistics because I'm not sure I would. I know it's the right thing to do, but then you are putting yourself in danger and you're putting yourself in the line of fire. OK, only with a group of teenagers, but we all know what can happen if they've had a few too many cans of hooch.
But that's always been the big question in England, hasn't it? In Britain, really, is whether do we believe what we read about how dangerous it is on our streets, or do we take that with a pinch of salt and do what
and get stuck in and just say, can you please stop smashing up that bus stop and behave responsibly, or I'll tell your mum. Yeah.
Perhaps you could do it if you're driving by in a car and you could just shout out the window or something
instead
from a safe distance.
No, you've got to stop the car and get out and walk over and approach
Give
these
them a piece of your mind.
But it's interesting, this report sort of dissects what some of the reasons behind this attitude might be. One of the reasons the Telegraph is speculating is to do with levels of immigration, that people feel like perhaps the society isn't as cohesive as it should be. I'm sceptical about that, but they talk about milkmen, strangely. We don't have milkmen, we don't have pub landlords as many as we used to, figures of local responsibility. It's weird, but it's the sense that there's no one to really protect in the community, and that there's not a sense of local feeling.
Good choices, Ollie. We'll see you in an hour. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. Top stories on Sunrise this morning. A policewoman's in hospital. Lordy, Lordy, let's get some sport, Jackie.
I'm so excited about that film. I'm just what did he say? When's it coming out? Toy Story 2 is my favourite all-time movie ever.
Let's do the sport and then we'll talk all about it.
The parties continue through the night in Madrid.
Belfast for us. Charlotte's here with the rest of the day's news now.
Thanks, Andrew. BP says it successfully placed a new cap on the well leaking oil into the Gulf of Mexico. It's hoped the device will treble the amount of oil that can be captured and could seal it for good. Tests will now be done to see if the cap works, as our US correspondent Robert Nisbet explains. If anyone's told him
Gently,
that.
they lower.
There in his tank with a football at the moment still.
Your favourite story of the day is, Charlotte?
That one, I think it's a great story. It's one that everyone wanted to know. What is going to happen to Paul the Octopus?
Well, yeah, cut down on his prime, I'd have thought, isn't he?
Well, maybe he had to go out on a winning streak, though. Maybe he didn't want to, rock those predictions.
Just don't say the word calamari anywhere near him.
He doesn't like that.
OK, good stuff, Charlotte. Thanks very much indeed. Let's take a look at what's on the front pages of the paper. Very good morning to you. You're watching Sunrise. Andrew Wilson here with you live through until 9. Still to come, a review of the morning's papers with podcaster Ollie Mann. But first, more on our top story. Calling for calm in Northern Ireland. Alistair Bunkle reporting there. Well, Charlotte's here. Rest of the day's news, Charlotte.
Thanks, Andrew. BP says it successfully placed a new cap on the well leaking oil into the Gulf of Mexico. It's hoped the device will treble the amount of oil that can be